This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. If you haven't subscribed yet, well, you're in luck, because now's the perfect time. This is episode number 34, and in this episode, I sit down with Matteo Rachocki, co-owner of Voodoo Brewing Company in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Matteo talks to me about how him and his brother Kurt really turned Voodoo around, how he crowdfunded the business to purchase Voodoo, and how drawing a line on the ground became a loophole for being able to sell beer on their property. Weird. I'm always drawing lines on the ground, but it's to stop people from crossing it. Guess these habitual line steppers just don't quit, because Voodoo has been doing quite well ever since that line was drawn. Well, you know what time it is. Time to sit back, crack open a beer, and enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, I'm Mike Curtin. This is the Brew World Order Podcast, and today I'm with Matteo Rachocki, co-owner of Voodoo Brewing Company in Pennsylvania. Located in Meadville, Pennsylvania, Voodoo was founded by a single member in 2005. Around the fall of 2010, Voodoo's head brewer was leaving, and that's when Kurt Rachocki stepped in. Kurt knew they needed some help on the business side, as Voodoo was really starting to struggle financially. Kurt reached out to his brother Matteo Rachocki, and with their shared vision, it helped the business to make a turn in the right direction. Soon thereafter, Kurt and Matteo became owners. Many years later, they are one of the smallest employee-owned businesses and now have 6 corporate locations and a slew of franchise locations with more on the way. And Matt Rachocki's here with me today. Matt, how are you?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, no problem, man. So, before you stepped in, what was the situation with Voodoo like, and how did you and your brother really, turn the corner and make things change?
Well, I think it's one of those kind of classic stories of, visionary, artist, pretty solid, brewing education and background, with a fairly put together business model, but just a failure to execute. There was a lot of pieces here, and a lot to work with, but there wasn't a whole lot of cohesion and full-fledged thinking behind some of the practices here. So I know when Kurt started showing up as a volunteer, right away you're kind of noticing some things, and obviously ultimately led to its near bankruptcy.
Right. What moves did you guys start to make that made things work?
One of the initial things, my brother did was just getting into the brewery and, working on, refining and working on a lot of the different recipes. I know one of the things he wanted to do right away was take the Four Seasons IPA product and kind of meld that into, he was a big fan of the West Coast style IPAs. He was drinking Green Flash out in California when he was at USD, and
right.
He and I co-owned a bar here in town before the brewery. And he worked real hard on getting some of these offerings over here in Crawford County for the first time. And that style he really enjoyed, and set out to work on all aspects of that, from, contracting and working with our hop vendors to working on the grain build to the water chemistry and what have you. And that's just one example. And then on my end, working with a bunch of the different investors. We had an angel investor and a few other of our local economic and redevelopment agencies had invested in the project back early on, and working with those different partners and working on repayment terms and conditions that would be suitable to the business model. And then really the biggest thing was having a direct to retail concept. The brewery wasn't even doing 200 barrels of beer a year and trying to make a living on wholesale distribution. And it just wasn't a sound, business model. So for us, having this location on Arch Street in Meadville, where the original production facility, was located and still is today, having a tap room and a direct retail model was really, I think, one of the bigger turning points, from at least a business perspective.
Right. So for you and your brother, was it always like a thing that you wanted to be brewery owners, or it kind of just like turned into that? Your brother, he was brewing, correct? Before he got there?
So he was brewing, but not in a formal sense. So he would come visit me in New York. I had started a business there when I was in college, And he'd come out in the summertime, and we'd work together for my business out there, and we would be home brewing and working on some things. And we had invested and bought this bar here in Meadville, turned it into like a craft beer bar. And we had plans to either put a brewery in the basement there, or we were working with some developers up in Erie on the Bayfront. We even had a LLC registered called Bayfront Brewing Company, and we were going to do that.
Right.
But through this whole process, we kind of found the way to branch out of the brewing business a little bit more expeditiously, if you will.
Right. Pivoting your plans a little bit and making things work for you.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was a great opportunity, and plus, when you see, the lending portfolio for this business predominantly being made up of these local fiduciary entities, I felt like we had a civic duty and responsibility to try to get those repaid, because if you default on loans like that, you're not only harming those agencies, but you're really going to put a hindrance on incubating new business in an area which really, really, truly needed it at the time.
Right.
So I kind of took it as a personal responsibility, personal goal, to get the business turned around and get those loans repaid.
Right. Did you have to put any funding of your own from either one of you, as far as to putting money into the business to make it grow?
We definitely did. So what we did as part of that refinance with all the lenders, as well as to get the tap room kind of underway, as well as satiate some of these, AP vendor bills, was I did, before it was really even a thing that had a name to it, I called up a bunch of my friends and family members and said, hey, I'm going to branch out into this brewing business down in Meadville. You guys want to invest? It's X amount of dollars per 1%. And I basically crowdfunded a new investment group into the business, which wasn't a traditional way of doing things, and didn't even really have a name yet. But it worked very well, because through my business in New York and some family and friends, we were able to raise the capital and allocate the stock accordingly to do these things.
It seems like a smart way of doing it. What is something when you first came into the business was something you never thought you were going to have to deal with?
Well, I mean, other than, rodents and other things that you don't expect to walk into on day one,
oh boy.
There was a slew of things here in Pennsylvania from our archaic liquor law standpoint that were being looked at and examined, and for the first time in like 100 years, altered, changed, modified in the liquor code. So I spent a lot of time when I wasn't swinging hammers and running plumbing and other things, trying to stay apprised of what changes were happening to all the different acts, like Act 39 when that passed in Pennsylvania. That was huge for us. And what that did is it really kind of opened a lot of opportunity for a lot of retail-based, bars and restaurants, but breweries, wineries as well. And that was an interesting piece. I had no idea it had to be so up to speed on legislation here in the state to really give yourself the edge that you needed to be, out front of it and utilizing some of this. And it incubated some really cool projects for us. Our satellite breweries, we were some of the first, if not the first, brewery in Pennsylvania to use a GS license for a retail location. And I've got a funny story about that I can tell later, but as well as like our food truck program, we call them the Voodoo trucks.
Right.
All of that was kind of incubated, spun out of as a byproduct of these changes in the liquor code.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. Voodoo trucks. Very cool. What is the quality that you possess that makes you a good business owner?
Me personally?
You personally, yes.
For me personally, I think my leadership style has always been to, do the exact opposite of micromanage and try to surround yourself with people far more intelligent than yourself.
Right.
And let those people really, thrive in their lanes. That's one thing I'll say about, our entity, especially with being employee owned. You have this not sense of ownership, you have intrinsic ownership, true ownership. And these individuals are already highly motivated. So if you get the right people in the right departments that can stay and focus in their lanes, you've got something pretty dangerous. And I think for me, being able to take a 50,000 foot view of that and set that infrastructure up to allow that to perform, I think is probably one of the things that I would say, really kind of set us up for success.
Right. Now, your employees obviously mean a lot to you. And you came up with the employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP. Can you explain that and how that came about?
Yeah, so the ESOP was a byproduct of finishing out the acquisition of the business from the original founder. It happened in like a two-part process, when myself, my brother, and our, we'll call them crowd-funded friends and family, if you will. That was the first dip. The second kind of completion of that project was the exit of the original founder. And what we did at that point was, well, if you're losing a founder or a figurehead or somebody, you've got to kind of combat that. And also, too, we wanted to make sure that, we really always truly wanted to have our employees vested in a literal sense. So it was kind of a whole three-pronged approach. So the business was changing ownership. We also were changing our corporate structure. And then at the third time, we're like, let's get this ESOP off the ground. And we did all that in one big foul swoop back at the end of 2014.
Nice. What would you say, as far as lessons learned, the biggest lesson you've learned from being a business owner and from just situations that have occurred?
For me, no business is the same. I've had a series of different businesses that I've started, incubated, or been involved in, since my professional career began. And, I guess my biggest lesson learned was the fact that no business is the same. No two businesses are alike. And you have to really take a look and don't make any assumptions, from one business to the next. Working very well with a great financial advisor, CPA group, especially when it comes to things like excise taxes and, getting all of your pre-tax stuff set up. That was kind of one of our biggest things was once you have a business that has not had to pay any kind of taxes and things for a long time, and then your business starts to be successful, having the right tax planning involved with your advisors and your financial planners is really important. Because I know a lot of businesses, when they start doing well is actually when they start failing. A lot of my professional colleagues that I know, they're just so used to getting by, and then they have a great year where they perform. And those years end up being the most difficult for them because of the fact they might not be doing the proper allocation of expenses or planning. So I guess that'd be my biggest thing. And again, this is strictly from more of a operations viewpoint,
right,
which is really what I do here.
Right. Yeah. Was there a defining moment of success for the business? Was there like that moment that stands out that you're like, okay, this is finally working. This is going in the right direction?
Yeah, and we've been fortunate enough to have that time and time again. But the first time for me was, we took this business over January 1, 2012. And by the end of June of that same year, 6 months later, we opened the tap room doors. And it was a single little shotgun, 3,500 square foot, small kitchen, 65 seats. And we went to open our doors, and I went to the bank to make change because I kind of forgot, like, oh yeah, we have registers and we need like ones and fives and quarters. And went to the bank here, and we had $67 left in our checking account.
No, boy.
And I took all that out and quarters and ones and fives, and I said, well, here goes nothing. Talk about putting all your chips in one basket. So we went to unlock the doors at noon or whatever time it was that day of the grand opening, and the line went around the block. And we actually had a one in, one out concept, and there's still nights during the week, pre-COVID, when we have that same one out, one in type situation here. We've been very fortunate to be embraced by the community, especially for a concept that was very unique to our area at the time. So I think that was kind of a defining moment, and definitely the first defining moment, and we kind of had something here.
Right. And you talk about pre-COVID. I mean, how did COVID really affect your business? Were you able to still maintain, or was it like a huge hit?
It was a massive hit for us. I mean, we had a lot of success in the direct-to-retail concept of tap rooms. So, pre-COVID, we had 7 pubs,
Wow.
7, concepts, if you will, where we had a direct-to-retail program, some kind in some form. COVID's really affected that for us. So we've closed 1 location permanently. We've closed our original Arch Street location since COVID started because we have another location across the street where our production facility is and has a much larger property and occupancy. So this has been closed. We have another pub that we are going to be leaving from a corporate standpoint here right around Thanksgiving. So it's affected us, pretty significantly.
Right.
Our gross revenues are down substantially, over 25% this year over last year. But however, being a company that's full of a lot of intelligent people, we were able to very quickly pivot and adapt our entire business model from a direct to retail concept to a more wholesale distribution side. We're up over 140% right now from a production standpoint. We've brewed more beer this year than ever before.
Right.
But it's much smaller margins and a much more expensive way to do business than our direct to retail because you've got packaging and aluminum and tons of labor and lots of loss, and you're working on razor thin margins. But it's been an interesting thing to do and a great kind of experiment. And I think it's something that's going to be here when the dining rooms kind of come back in swing, and whenever that is, this part of the business I don't think will go away either. So it will be to our benefit. But it certainly had made us look at some projects on back burners and bring them to the foreground, pretty quickly. But yeah, COVID's been a real tough hit for us, and I think a lot of restaurants and breweries, but especially those who really went in on that direct to retail model, they've been very affected by this.
Yeah, I would imagine so. From when you first got to Voodoo till now, work wise, how important is it for you to be there? And how important is a mental break from everything?
I mean, I'm a big advocate for both of those things. You can't be an absentee owner, especially when you're running an operation like what we have here. I have some really, really great department heads and mid-level management, but they rely on you, and you need to be around, and you need to be here. And there's days and times where, we've launched programs and done different events and things where you're in there, you're in the trenches. You're right there next to your fellow employee owners, and it's a huge part of what makes us who we are. So I find that to be extremely valuable. You're never off the clock. Even last night we had a massive storm here, and we had power outages, and our security systems were on a whack, and our production brewery still doesn't have power from yesterday afternoon. But you're never off the clock. You're on call 24/7, and when you let yourself check out like that, things can slip. However, I will also say, I'm a family man. I have a wife, I've got 3 kids, and I missed a lot of the early years from my earlier born children here incubating and getting this business going. But trying to make time for the family and allowing them to participate in what we're doing, but also have some downtime. So I will schedule what I call kind of blackout dates, and I'll make myself off grid periodically throughout the year. But they're very specifically chosen times where it's and you prepare your staff for that. But it's very important. And I think it's something that everybody needs to do for that mental break and opportunity to refresh and kind of connect with your family or with nature or, whatever motivates you and drives you, so you can come back and give it your all again.
Right. So what do you think has been one of the biggest changes for you in, let's say, the last 5 to 6 years in the brewing industry?
From the distribution side of the house, I would say, competition in the market has gotten, very, very tight. There's a lot of breweries making some pretty good liquid out there, and we're all competing for shelf space. The importance of working with your wholesalers and your retail customers, working on the planograms and working on SKU authorizations, and even if you can get SKU authorizations, all of these things, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't a thing. Like, you didn't have to think about it. You sold beer, and everybody wanted it, and you could get space for it. Now it's got to be an incredible brand with legendary liquid, with fantastic artwork. You have to have every piece of this, for it to be attractive to not only the consumer but the retail buyers and your wholesalers. There was a period where we were getting calls consistently all the time for people trying to pick up the brand all over the U.S. They wanted it for distribution, and these days, you've got to talk people into it.
Right.
We're very lucky, that we have the brand and the allure that we have, so we are able to secure great, wholesale partners. But I don't think that would be the case for especially someone breaking into the industry nowadays. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I would imagine so. It seems like a new brewery is popping up every single day. What's next for your company? I know there's a couple different places that are going to be opening up. What's the future look like for Voodoo?
The future for us is pretty well defined. Things can change by the minute, but we've really worked hard with developing one of the first brewery retail pub franchise divisions, and we have a few of them already in operation and a slew in planning. And we think that it's going to be something we will continue to invest and develop in for the long term. Having some independently owned locations all across the U.S., maybe even globally, where you've got products available to new consumers, to new wholesalers, and it's a great opportunity to get the brand out there, get the liquid out there, and all the while, just us continuing to develop and have great gathering places, at our own corporate stores as well. So we're going to go pretty heavy into that and continuing to explore more of the distribution side as that becomes a more important and bigger piece of our business.
Gotcha. And for you, I love this question. What was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
I would have to say for me, living in New York, at the time when I was living in New York, I would say one of my was Brooklyn Lager. Brooklyn Lager? Okay. It seems kind of like a silly one to pick, but it had this really big, full-bodied flavor. It had some bitterness to it. Like everybody else, as you're getting into your earlier drinking years, it's these commercial, light lagers, and it was kind of the first flavorful beer that I had really had, and really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a good beer. So if somebody came to you, which I'm sure they always do, and asked you for advice on opening their own brewery, what would you say to them?
A lot of people say don't do it.
Right.
Yes. I'm not going to say don't do it. I'm just going to say, you really have to make it very clear that you have a great business model. You know exactly what that model looks like. You have the opportunity to change it and pivot based on things outside of your control. Being willing to put in the work. It's not an easy business, especially now to break into. Making sure that you have all the correct pieces and the correct people, in those places where you need them. That's the best advice I can give, trying to get into it today.
Gotcha. And did you have a funny story for us?
Yeah, so I thought of a story as we were discussing. So our second location in Homestead, Pittsburgh, it's off the waterfront, and it's an old municipal building that we bought and we renovated. And, we're one of the first breweries, if not the first brewery, to utilize a general storage license for a retail pub. And, it was a byproduct of a change in liquor code that if you kept referencing back and back and back and back to all the different references, it basically enabled what I'm going to call a loophole for someone to have individual sale of malt and brewed beverages out of a general storage facility, which was intended to essentially be like a warehouse space.
Gotcha. Right.
So talked to our liquor attorneys, like, nope, you're right. I mean, if you follow the code back, like, you can do this. So we went through it, built tap room. It was 2 or 3 days before opening, and LCE comes in, does their inspection, and they're like, "Oh, well, you guys have like a tasting room here. You guys have a bar, and you're gonna sell beer." I'm like, "Yeah, we're gonna sell beer." And they're like, "Oh, well, let me get back to you." And so, like, a day later, they came. "Well, yeah, I guess you can do it. You're right, but we're gonna come back with the fact that we're gonna say it has to be off-premise consumption only," which threw a huge snag in our entire plan. You know, a whole year of buying a building, renovating it, you know, getting everything ready. You know, our beers in the cooler, we're ready for grand opening weekend here.
Right.
And we're being told that all of a sudden now we can only sell for off-premise consumption, which would basically be like growlers, crowlers, and 4-packs, 6-packs, cases, whatever.
Right.
And I had the brilliant idea. So I went to Home Depot, and we went and got some painter's tape and a big thing of yellow spray paint. And we ended up drawing a line from the front door around the outside perimeter of the building and right down the middle of the bar. And I reapplied with our licensed serving area. Everything behind the line was licensed, and everything on the other side of the line, I de-licensed it.
Okay.
So what we would actually do is customers would come up to the bar, and that line's still painted down the center of that bar.
Right.
It doesn't apply anymore, but at the time it was very important. Customers would put the money on the bar on the other side of the line. We'd put the drink next to the money. They'd take the drink, and they would bring it themselves across that line on the bar. And then at that point, they're on an unlicensed area, private property, in an area with no open container law.
Right.
So we basically found a way to still, in the 11th hour, you know, open our tap room, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, under this newfound loophole.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty stressful yet kind of funny situation that we found ourselves in, you know, back in 2014 when we opened that place up.
No, that's using the brain in a tight spot for sure. So I have a little segment called Quickfire 5. 5 quick questions, beer related. Ready? Okay. One of your beers that you'd recommend someone try?
Good Vibes.
Good Vibes, which is?
It's a West Coast style IPA with Apollo, Amarillo, Mosaic, and Galaxy in it. It's one of our, you know, biggest selling brands, and it's incredible. 7.3% ABV. Excellent branding. It's a good testament of kind of what Voodoo is. Gotcha.
Favorite brewery other than your own?
Favorite brewery other than our own? I would probably have to say Sierra Nevada. I was just at their newest facility and had some amazing beers and was completely in awe of the place. And I think it's a great, you know, thing to aspire to.
For sure. Favorite style of beer?
Lagers. I'm a lager guy. I'm into the we're doing a Foder aged lager series here, and it's basically the only thing in my fridge now. I've really gotten out of the IPA, especially the New Englands. I'm not really doing those much anymore, so I'd say lagers.
Yeah. Last beer you drank that blew you away?
So I just did a event out of town in Ohio, outside Newark, Ohio, at a place called Dank House, and they had this incredible like milkshake IPA on. That was, if I remember correctly, it was like a raspberry or watermelon, and it was just phenomenal.
Gotcha. And you have 1 keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. What keg are you choosing?
I would probably choose right now our Foder aged honey lager.
Okay. Matteo, that's all I have for you, man.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'm flattered for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast, here today with Matteo Rachocki from Voodoo Brewing Company in Pennsylvania. Thanks, man. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Matteo Rachocki of Voodoo Brewing Company in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Whether you're passing through, you live in the area, or just visiting a friend nearby, you should definitely check them out. Also, give him a follow on social media. Every other Sunday, I'll be releasing a new episode, so subscribe and you'll never miss one. Also, give us a follow on social media, because why not? I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order Podcast. You stay safe out there.